All right. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the stream. We are joined today by the one and only Ashanti Alston. Hold on, am I live? Okay, yeah, I'm live. Okay, cool. All right, welcome everybody to the stream. Thank you for coming. Thank you for tuning in. We're here to speak with Ashanti Alston, the man, the myth, the legend. I know a lot of people are really excited to be a part of this conversation, and so I'm really looking forward to all the wonderful stuff that comes from this conversation. Ashanti's been a major inspiration of mine, and I think he's going to be a very valuable source of stories about radicalism over the decades. And so, just a heads up for the audience, as for how this is going to go, I have a few questions for Ashanti, and then we'll have time for a few questions from the audience. It's going to be about 2 hours, less than 2 hours, preferably, as Ashanti has other things to do. But save your questions until it's time to get to questions from the chat. Otherwise, it'll be buried and I won't see it when it's time to answer them. So, without further ado, Ashanti, thank you for coming to the show.
Listen, thank you for having me. You don't know how excited I am to be on your show. So it's an honor, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
As am I. As am I. For those who aren't familiar with you, do you mind sharing a bit about your background and who you are?
Okay. Born in Plainfield, New Jersey, 1954. Uh, just turned 71.
Oh, happy
Um,
birthday.
thank you, thank you. Um, Came up during the 60s. That 60s was that period for me where I came alive in a sense, the political consciousness and coming to an understanding of who I wanted to be in this world. And because of my experiences in Plainfield with seeing how the black community resisted the police, it changed my life. It made me imagine myself in the role of rebels, of nationalist rebels at the time, who actually took over the community, ran the police out, and it was just something that was just going to stick with me to this day. Um, and this was all like 14 years old, 13,
Wow.
14. Yeah. Um, and it was like since then, I just wanted to know more. There was in my neighborhood too. This is the black community, the major black community in my hometown. There was a community center, and there was these after the National Guard with the tanks came in and was able to retake that area of the black community. There was still meetings going on, and the meeting was all about like how we had to keep on organizing. And in the meetings, you heard the names Stokely Carmichael, H. Rep Brown, this expression Black Power. So I wanted to know more and kept going to the meetings from that community center to Nation of Islam, whatever. And then, was trying to find out more information. By the time I was 16, me and one of my lifetime friends, Jihad Abdul Momet, he's Jihad Abdul Momet now. Back then we were me, Michael Alston, and he was David Bryant. um, we saw something about the Black Panther Party, and I actually think it was we was walking past a store that had a magazine rack outside the store, um, and it might have been a Time magazine, a Newsweek. but it had pictures of Panthers on the front. And I think it was Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, but that
Hmm.
it was the black leather jackets, the black beret, and it was the arms. And we were like, wow, who is this? Who are they? And
They
us
had a
getting
penchant for
magazines.
fashion for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like we wanted to find out more, and he actually asked his father, and his father didn't know much either. But his father was, let's find out. And so at that point, we found out there was chapters actually in New Jersey. There was a lot of chapters. Ones that were closest to us was in Jersey City and Newark, and so we would go to them chapters, and that was it. It was from the Black Power ideas to Panthers that also Black Power, but from a much more revolutionary socialist perspective. And there was this thing about the programs they had and their willingness to defend it.
Right.
And that was it. That was it. For both of us, there was no turning around, even for his father, because when we started the chapter, his father was a part of the chapter too. There was a few adults, but most of us was like high school students. And but that was like the, besides that rebellion, that was the one that put me on a course that helped me to understand perspective. The perspective has had to keep on growing to understand class analysis, race analysis. Um, what are these things? What is this idea of socialism? Why do we have to study Karl Marx, Frantz Fanon? Besides reading um, W.E.B. Du Bois and other folks like that, it's like, oh, to be in this struggle, you really to know a lot.
For sure.
And if you ever hear Jamal Joseph of Black Panther Party talk about his experience, ours was very similar because we was really impressed with the black beret, black leather jacket, that type thing, and the guns. Kind of expecting that. But when we went into that office and stuff, and at some point to become Panthers, we would be getting that uniform and that them guns too. You go into that office and you start developing that relationship, they're not pushing no uniform or no guns in your hands. They're pushing reading material in your hand. And then they're encouraging you to get involved with programs. So whether it's the breakfast program, the liberation schools, or the stuff around rent strikes, you had to get involved with political work at the same time that you want to raise your consciousness. And so that was the thing that got us in and gave us an understanding that it's about the gun, but politics is in command, as they used to say, and your ability to organize your people, is the thing that's important. And even though we didn't get the uniform at the time or the guns, the uniform, because of that already order had came from the top that uh, Panthers couldn't wear the uniforms anymore because it had made us sitting targets for police and FBI um, repression. And the gun thing would just come later anyhow, depending on how serious you were about being this servant of the people. So we never actually got to wear the uniform, but we got to be involved with the community work, and eventually we all had to go through certain trainings around the gun, which was called TE, technical education. PE was political education.
Ah.
So yeah, so that started me and him and others, and even his father. That started us off, and I feel like I'm still that person. The things that grounded me in Panther Party experience still ground in terms of constantly you got to learn, and constantly you got to make them learnings important in your practical activities in life and in your community organizing. Otherwise, it's just intellectual stuff, you know. But I still feel like that's me now, and I'm always reading, always trying to understand more, and then also trying to immerse myself in the real important stuff. Maybe more so now as an elder, but still, to interact with that everyday, experience of Black people, being under the boot of this empire. That's got to be it. That's got to be it always.
Yeah, I've always found the that balance of experience and theory to be very important. And one of the things I admire about the Panthers is that they made sure to have that component of both. You know, you have to get involved in some kind of activity alongside, you have to get engaged in political education. A lot of times people are doing one or they're doing the other, but they're not doing both, and both are definitely necessary.
Right, right. And we were definitely getting that because it was like right off from the finding a founding a chapter in our hometown. One of the first things that we was able to set up was started in the summer, so it was a free lunch program. It wasn't a free breakfast program. That's more towards the school years. But we started off right off free lunch program, and then we had eventually had there was one storefront office. We had a storefront office. Then we was able to get another one that was the free clothing program, and then we like interacting with other people. The whole thing around a free medical clinic, and then the anti-war movement and stuff was going on. So we also participating in the anti-war movement, and all of that was even in the high school we was in. To the point where I ran for the vice president of the student council, and off of an Eldridge Cleaver speech. And surprisingly, the next day after the election, people run up to me telling me I won the vice presidency. And Jihad was already one of the leaders of the Black Student Union, which seems like weird now because what high schools got Black student unions or them type of political organization?
Right, that level of
But even
engagement
then,
is rare.
yeah, yeah. But then, like, we had Black student unions. It was like a lot of different organizing going on. So it was that feeling of being immersed, a real revolutionary movement with that energy that comes from that was really powerful. It was really powerful.
So going through that experience, where would you say your mind was at in terms of like your thoughts on revolution? Like what do you where do you think we were heading? What was the direction that you were striving toward? What was your like ideal?
I think from the Black Power movement, it was war. I mean, it's so funny. I can laugh about it now, but it was war because that's what it was during them rebellions. Because back then everybody would gather around the television, and back then too, you didn't have that many channels, so you're gonna because of all the rebellions, you're gonna get that on the news all the time. That Newark just jumped off, Detroit just jumped off, L.A., all these other places, and still the civil rights movement was still going on, and you seeing the repression of the civil rights movement, them water hosing people down the street, and it had that feel of we're at war. And so us coming out of, and that might be the urban experience too, that might have made a difference between like the civil rights movement in different places in the South. But a lot of us young folks, we wanted to fight back in a more warrior way, and seeing some semblance of that in the rebellions, and then seeing the organized way that Panthers organized, and even to some extent, even the Nation of Islam, because the fruit of Islam was a very organized aspect of the nation. And you've seen this sense of discipline and this fearlessness in engaging the enemy, these racist folks that were over us, from the local level to the city level, state, whatever, you know. And so joining the Panthers, we had an idea from learning about other struggles that this is a long-term struggle and that it's fought on different levels, and that if you join in this organization, you also got to be willing to fight on different levels. So if you're doing political education for the cadre, and then political education, I mean technical education, at the same time you're reading about all these other struggles. You're reading about the Chinese Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, the liberation struggles in Asia, Africa, Latin America. You're also seeing yourself in them kinds of roles in your more urban setting, but still you are fighting, willing to put your life on the line. So that Panther experience gave us a sense of understanding that a lot of thinking has to go into it, but a lot of training has to go into it, and a lot of preparation to make this struggle happen in a way that's going to sustain itself to victory. And I'm saying it like that, sustain ourselves to victory, like we're reading that, but I think on some levels too, that might have been our youthfulness. I think there was still that feeling that's developing so rapidly. This might not be no long distance. Maybe we will win in our lifetime for real. I think a lot of us felt that. I know I did, and you just gave your life to it, whether you made it or not, you know. You did. When you find out what happened to Fred Hampton and other folks that was assassinated, or other folks that then got jammed up and now they're in the prisons, you know what the consequences are, but you feel like you got to keep it going, because more and more we're going to develop our forces from the belly of the empire to the whole international scene, that we're going to
Oh.
bring this monster down.
So, in
We're
a
going to bring it
sense,
down.
seeing that repression was a boost in motivation almost.
It's funny because you see the repression. For some people, I'm sure that made them back up, but it seemed like a lot of people were still coming on. When me and Jihad came into the party. Now you're talking about 1970 at least. 69, Fred Hampton had already got assassinated. There's Hugh P. Newton facing the death penalty. Bobby Seale and Erica Huggins on trial in New Haven. Um, but folks are still joining. Folks are still joining. And we know that other revolutions, they go through the similar things. It's like, even though they may be suffering a lot and there's losses, because of the cause, people still joining, not only replacing those who they've lost, but more are still coming in. So it's like, yeah, the Vietnamese is kicking the United States ass and ain't got no technology like the United States. Oh, we can do this. We can do this. And that's why we say the spirit of the people is greater than man's technology. Yeah, yes.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think a lot of us felt like, even with the repression or the losses, we're gonna still come on.
For sure. And it sounds like you were deeply inspired and shaped and motivated by your experience organizing in that time. But I am curious, were there issues or conflicts or concerns that you had dealt with or navigated through in that time as well that also developed your position today?
Well, I can remember a lot of times, like especially me and Jihad, because we did so much um, together. Like we would be walking from one community to another, and here comes the police. And sometimes they would harass us. Other times they seem to just want to let us know that they see us and
Hmm.
what we're doing. We could be going coming back from Newark or New York on a bus, and it would be so funny that so many times when we got off the bus in Plainfield, our hometown, there's a police car not too far away. Oh, come on, this can't be no coincidence. And then, the phone thing, sometimes you hear the funny noises on the phone, all that stuff. But it's like these are things that we've been learning about, and we're trying to be cognizant of it, and just still figure out how to do the things we want to do. Now, in that period there, there was a period like all this high school stuff and us organizing. A cop is killed in our hometown, and quickly depended on the people who they consider the main organizers, who happened to be me and Jihad. And so the next thing we know, we getting arrested, and they're charging us with the death of the cop. Um, Out of that, like that, we suffered in terms of when that happened. It was a lot of the young folks who was working with us, backed up. I'm sure parents had played a part too, and maybe their own fears. I mean, nobody wants to
Mm-hmm.
be caught up like that. But me and Jihad's attitude was like, oh, just we keep on going. And it was a 14-month period in the jail, and it wasn't for the fact that we had connected with some good lawyers who were able to show that this is a classic frame up. We were facing the death penalty, you know.
Wow.
But me and him, it was like, well, we in this jail, we ain't sticking around even for the trial if we don't have to. So
Mm-hmm.
we already working on how
You're
can we get a
plotting already.
hacksaw blade. We are plotting to get at it because that's our mentality. That's how the experience of being in this Panther Party was like. We gonna win, as Malcolm would say, by any means necessary. We're gonna do this. We're
Yeah,
gonna
so you're
use
not
our
sitting
brain.
back and just trusting in the structure of the legal system to exonerate you. Like, there's no
Yeah,
point in
yeah.
that. That's
So
not what the struggle is about.
yeah, and that comes out later, like once at some point when both of us are pulled into the ranks of the Black Liberation Army. Same thing. So, but even when we get out, his family has him working with another organization in upstate New York, but my family moves me to out to North Carolina, where we're from, family wise, because there was rumors of threats coming from the police. But 6 months later, I'm back, and we're reorganizing that chapter again, and start back into the process of the work. So even with that repression, but even when we come back to do the work, it's not the same members, but then there are some new members, you know, and we begin that work again with the Newark chapter, New York, the chapters in New Jersey. The work goes on, you know. And that attitude stays with me to this day, that even when we suffer a loss, even when our mistakes causes us setbacks, it's not over. It's not over. Now we got to go back to the drawing board. We got to figure out what happened, what went wrong, what do we have to do better. Now let's proceed. Yeah.
Wow. So, just out of curiosity, what sort of political transformation would you say you've gone through over the past 2 decades? Because that time came and then that time went. And so I suppose it's a two-part question. The first is, why do you think that, or what do you think are some of the reasons that the struggle ended up going underground and diminishing for such a long period of time following the 70s? And then also, how did that experience shape your current politics? And then all the learning and experience you did after that?
Okay. Um, Even at the time uh, of getting recruited into the underground, um, it was clear that the state repression and the counterintelligence program operations was uh, affecting us a lot. I mean, it was comrades that was getting framed on things. It was other comrades who would lose their jobs or their house the contract for the house wasn't renewed. Um, or how the media would still blast us as terrorists, criminals, and especially for because that the party did we had an emphasis on organizing the lumpen proletariat that you know which if people really understand that that lumpen is not just the street organization folks, that's the folks on welfare, that's the folks that are just they've already been pushed out of being necessary for the means of production.
Mm-hmm.
So people that was coming into the Panther Party were coming from uh, um, the ranks of public assistance or welfare, as we call it today. They were coming from the street organizations, yes, the prisoners, the ex-prisoners, but even folks that had been down and out in the street, living in abandoned buildings. They were alcoholics, they were drug addicts. Same group that a lot of but in Nation Islam also organized, giving people a different way to see their lives.
I mean, that was Malcolm X's story, pretty much.
Yes, yes. So that was key for Black Panther Party. And that was key when Panthers talk about organizing the lumpen. They might have used that Marxist term, but you're still talking about the same people that Malcolm talked about. But it was clear, like, man, we were losing folks. When folks got were getting framed, then that's monies we gotta divert for lawyers, make the families getting taken care of, other things. That meant that other works was not getting done as effectively if the breakfast programs here or the medical clinics there or we're renting space for cadre to be able to live. It affected a whole lot of stuff, plus the internal contradictions that was happening in the Black Panther Party at the time, because this is that period where the split is getting ready to happen, and then it does happen.
Right. And tell me a little
So
bit about that split and what it entailed.
yeah, so all during this time, like we are doing this work, and so this was like 1970, 71. Um, there was times where I'm working the Plainfield chapter, but also they need help in the Harlem office.
Mm,
So I find myself going back and forth between Harlem and Plainfield because the Harlem chapter was losing members after the victory of the Panther 21 trial. There was folks that didn't come back to the party, but the propaganda was also the state propaganda was also frightening Black people into supporting the Panthers. And in Harlem, in one instance, with the breakfast program, it always went on. But then there was one time where the children were getting sick from the food, and come to find out later that the police had got to the food and poisoned the food. I don't know what they put in, but the children was getting sick.
wow.
So now the parents is like, not bringing their children, not even them coming. And it was that the effects of the media, the shootouts and ambushes and all this other stuff happening. People was backing up. So At that point, there's comrades who are captured comrades who are Black Liberation Army who are in New York, but they're also facing death penalty in California. And so at some point, we had to figure out how to help them get out. And this is us, Panther Party. We're above ground group. This is one of the roles of Asafia Bukhari, because Safi at the time was in charge of the Harlem office. She was also the point person between the above ground and the underground. And when the underground needed things, they would communicate to her. And she knew how to take that information and to get it to others to get their needs met. If it was captured comrades, then that meant she would connect with folks to replenish the ranks of the BLA to be able to help get them out. And I happened to have been one of them people. So, and at that time, I had to make that kind of decision. One, Jersey, my partner just had a baby, um, and all of that. So, am I going underground, or the child is here, the work? But I decided, because they needed this to happen, to accept the invitation to go under. And it was around getting what who came to be known as the New York Five out of the Manhattan House of Detention, also called the Tombs. But that was part of things that was going on in the Panther Party in general, but specifically those who broke off from Huey P. Newton and that clique that caused the split. It caused us to move in developing the ranks of the Black Liberation Army a lot sooner than was expected. But we had to get our comrades out. And the cell that I was pulled into, our mission was to get them out. Even though it was not successful, um, I shared a story about it for two reasons. One, because during the time that I was captured and in prison, the statute of limitations ran, which means that because the state of New York did not try me and others for it, they for whatever reason they waited. Now they couldn't bring it up because they don't let the statute of limitations pass. The
Right.
second reason being that now that I can tell it, I want people to know what we tried to do, because we gotta understand the necessity of fighting this struggle on all levels. You cannot understand a Harriet Tubman who risked her life constantly going in and out of the South. Every time she come out of the South and up to the North or whatever, she could have stayed. Yet she decides she's going back, and she's going to go back and get as many as she can. So what we wanted to show, and one of the reasons I tell it, is that we have to be as daring, and some might say as crazy, but that's this revolution for our liberation. You cannot wait for this system to do anything for you but keep that boot on your neck. If you're not willing to take them other steps to create the capacity to move on them other levels, to free your comrades, or to replenish the financial needs of your movement, which is bank expropriations, you know, and even there was times when we was hitting the drug dealers and whatnot. Money's being funneled into the movement. You know, we are at war, and we had no illusions about uh, this sacredness of legality systems. No, that shit is not sacred. No, you break the law. Martin Luther King, break the law.
Yeah, legality is not equivalent to morality.
No. So, and even with that, so we're so many of us who went to the underground, we don't know other cells. We know other cells out there, but the ranks of the Black Liberation Army are growing because of the amount of acts that you find out are happening. But from security level, it's always a need to know basis. You know, you don't need to know what other folks are doing and whatnot, but there's key folks that do, them Safia Bukaris, who know how to coordinate, who know how to make sure that one has what they need to be able to move forward. I want people to get that from me. You know, if I got anything to share, you got to get that part from me too. I talk love. I talk a lot about our the need for us to get to know each other and to be able to take care of each other. It's all a part of that. I don't want people to get, oh, Shanti's really about peace. Yeah, I am about peace, but I understand what it takes
To get that piece.
to get that peace,
Hmm.
and some of the things that might need to happen in terms of our development to make sure that we have them kind of understandings. We are still at war.
So I suppose my question following all of that is, what would you say brought you to the place of, whether you want to call it black anarchism, new African anarchism? Where did you get, how did you get to that point? How did you arrive at that position?
Yeah, it's funny because one of my comrades in the Harlem chapter, his name was Frankie Zitz, and so when I was Frankie Zitz would always make sure that work around the political prisoners was being done. Frankie Zitz and Nat Shanks, but Frankie Zitz mainly around the anarchism. And I don't think he even called himself an anarchist, but it was the kind of conversations that we had, and more importantly, the kind of information that he would run off and pass out in the community, especially in movement settings and stuff. And the information was around um, the relationship between historical relationships between the anarchists and the Marxist Leninists. For example, the Russian Revolution, where how Lenin and them treated the anarchists like Makhno and his forces and others. And Frankie, because we were a Marxist Leninist group, Frankie wanted us to not be naive about what that meant. And he would use the example of, you see the Communist Party, the USA one, always this serving relationship to the Russian or the Soviet Union and stuff like that. And he would print out this information on Makhno and them to show that there was groups that even oppose Lenin, the Marxist Leninists, that we was all looked at as, oh, this is the way to revolution. And I would argue with him. We'd be arguing and stuff, but we're comrades, we argue. But it wasn't until I went to prison that I got a chance to read stuff, and we would always say, you turn that prison into university. You're there. Don't waste that time. So in some of the prisons I was in, especially Lewisburg prison, I had access to critical theory readings, radical psychologies, Wilhelm Reich, Eric Fromm, other cats, um, uh, feminism, from mainstream to radical, I must say, which all was helpful for me at the time because I had never read anything, but all giving me different ways of seeing, I think, mistakes we made in the party, or could have done better with, from things that I felt like, oh, it's giving me a better insight into me. And then it was giving me a better way to look at some of the contradictions that led to the downfall of the Black Panther Party and other groups. When you start studying, similar things happen with the Young Lords, American Indian movement, and the Chicano movements, the workers movements. There was so much internal contradictions that led to groups' demise, and the counterintelligence program just knew what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So the anarchism, the critical theory, the radical feminisms and psychology was giving me ways to look at us as persons and our organizations as structures that was so many aspects was tied into the authoritarian system that had a boot on our neck. And I wanted to like, oh my God, then we can't be doing this anymore, that anymore. We got to really be conscious of we're going to be anti-sexist. Oh, we really have to be, and not just get up into a program and say, we're an anti-sexist organization and all that other stuff. We had not even considered what it meant to be anti-authoritarian because we never even understood what it meant to be authoritarian. Now I'm getting it. So I see that I am learning, and the things that I want to read are different. So
Right.
I see myself veering away from the Marxism, Leninism readings, and I want more of stuff that's giving me more anti-authoritarian readings. Literature I started to get from Canada and a few other anarchist groups become very helpful. And moving to at some point I was put in Marion, Illinois prison, and two of my comrades there considered themselves anarchists. And it increased my, because now I got someone to talk to more. Like, why did you? Because at first it was just too idealistic, and all this other stuff, and then they were showing me like, no, it's really practical, and it's really giving you some different ways to develop how we relate to each other that can bring down the tendencies for hierarchy, that can bring down the tendencies to harm each other because someone is female or someone is of a different ideology and stuff. And I never had that before, but it made sense. And then you study in the Spanish Civil War and all the other different struggles of anarchists and seeing how they're doing amongst the workers. And it's like, oh, there are other ways of developing struggle that does not have to be that hierarchy. That does not have to be that you got this ideology, which for me, when one says ideology, it means you have all the answers. You don't have to go by ideologies. You can have something that brings people together and bring all your ideas together. That's one reason why I'm so close to what I learned from the Zapatistas. So all of them things was leading me to anarchism. And I think at some point in there in California prison, federal prison, I at least started to call myself that, but I didn't necessarily when I first got out of prison. It took me a minute. But then after a while, I said, no, man, I want people to know. And I want people who I'm interacting with to know why I'm there. And that led me to becoming involved with different anarchist organizations, which at the time there was no black ones, there was none of color, but it was Love and Rage. And I've learned a lot from my experience of working with Love and Rage, though I never became a member. But then here comes the Anarchist People of Color Conference. But all of that started, my journey from there started in prison, and I can so clearly pinpoint it because I'm sitting there. It's obvious we lost, and I wanted to understand the reasons why. And I debated my comrades because we don't like to hear we lost,
Mm.
you know. So when I said that, even with them, we having our discussions, like, yo, Not only look at where we are, but look what happened with that leadership. Yo, man, we got to do this different. No, it can't just be we're going to still study Marxism. No, we got to look at some other lenses
Hmm.
and even heated debates with that. Necessary debates, but it's like you got to have them.
Yep.
And others, some comrades became Muslims. Others stuck to the Marxism, Leninism. But I know me and a few others like, we wanted something more anti-authoritarian, and
S-
we was finding the
So I suppose as a segue from that, you'd mentioned earlier, the critical theory, the anarchism, the radical feminism, the radical psychology, and it reminds me of your text, one of my favorites of yours, which is, entitled Childhood and the Psychological Dimension of Revolution. To
yes.
me, what you're saying about how some people went in different directions in terms of their ideology following the loss of the Black Panther Party, what role did you think psychology and the conditioning of our society played into that? And really, just in general, if you can share what your thesis was with that text.
With that particular text, then that's definitely me reading radical psychologies and the radical feminisms and the radical psychologies, in particular, the writings of Wilhelm Reich. One of some of the books that he was mainly known for is called The Mass Psychology of Fascism.
Hmm.
Uh, the Another one was The Function of the Orgasm. He was out of Freud's school, but he was much more radical, and even to the point where as a out of Freud's school, he connected himself with more in Germany the workers movement. He wanted to work in them working class communities. He felt like he was seeing things that would be helpful in getting workers to develop a more revolutionary consciousness instead of being afraid. Fears that came directly from the conditioning of a capitalist authoritarian society. He wanted to challenge that, and I gravitated toward his and others that kept coming to that authoritarian mentality. So, but Wilhelm Reich went a lot into family structure and the role that family structure plays in inculturating the society's values and norms and thinkings into the very child that they're giving birth to. They have it themselves because they got it from their parents. But never, now that you just joined the Social Democratic Party or the Communist parties or however they would call it at the time, it don't make you the revolutionary yet. It's a good step. But his thing was you got to deal with how, even as a child, boy, girl, how you going to behave, how you going to dress, how you going to talk to others in authority, or however that Reich's thing was, you got to be able to deal with that, the deepness of that in your psychology at the same time that you're fighting this monster. And when I'm reading that, I'm like, oh yeah, because we done been under this for 400 years, and it made me think about how Black child rearing practices are as a result of being under the boot of this monster. And yes, you accept that it was done a lot to save us from getting sold down the river, beaten, or killed. But then you realize the practices even continue from formal slavery to that brief period of the um,
Sharecropping.
no, before the sharecropping, the okay, you got the end of slavery Emancipation Proclamation, or what's the name writes on it, W.B. Du Bois.
Uh,
Reconstruction,
Reconstruction.
Reconstruction. Reconstruction being that amazing period where we really, black folks had political power. And then after that period was the Hayes Tilden compromise and the whole with the compromise, yo, we got to get them niggas, man. Oh, they got too much power here. Ku Klux Klan, all you other ones, all you Confederate folks, it's okay. So what happens as a result of that is that they pretty much put us right back in our place. So the fear, just we continuing them practices to protect us, but at the same time, on a life affirming level, we still got to shut ourselves down. And Reich's work and others helped me to see how we continue them things today,
Hmm.
even in how we raise our kids.
Yeah,
You
your
know.
article was really impactful in my development as an anarchist. It's one of the earlier texts that I would have read. I ended up basing one of my early videos on it. That video is called "Why Revolution Needs Therapy," and
Mm,
it just resonated with me, just the ways in which the impact of childhood has on our psyches as adults, as revolutionaries, and not just childhood, just the narratives
yeah,
of the media, of the education system, of all the spaces we find ourselves in, shaping our imagination, really, our
yeah,
ability to perceive ourselves and perceive the world around us, and our perception of change and how we can change the world around us.
yeah,
In a sense, we end up
yeah.
recreating some of the systems that we are so submerged in because we haven't taken that time to deconstruct those systems.
Right, right. And the thing people just gotta understand. Like, I'm not saying that they have to happen first. I'm saying that they have to happen at the same time that we're battling for our survival and liberation against this monster, you know. But if we don't, we recreate oppression amongst ourselves. So it's like if we're talking about our liberation, we really do need to see how much are we still connected on psychological levels to psychological and cultural to the very system that we want to destroy. And when we don't do that, then we actually continue to just act it out on each other, which is also we harm each other. We harm ourselves, we harm each other. So when groups, and this is even my thing now, it's like we can't seem to pull it together. We can't keep blaming it on the new versions of counterintelligence programs, state, federal, whatever. We got to look at what we do to each other, with each other, because we have not figured out my sexism, my egos, my authoritarianism,
Yeah, I
you
mean
know.
the counterintelligence, they're doing their job. They're gonna do what
Yes,
they have to do, but it's up to
yes,
us to counter the counterinsurgency.
yeah, yeah. And I just feel like it can't, we got to get out of the thing like it's just handing out information or getting people to come to a rally, a protest, or even a meeting. If we're not factoring new approaches that takes into our our if we're not taking into the new things we can get from readings of like radical psychologies and the different things like that, if we're not factoring that into how we are interacting, then we are no way uh, bringing down the effects of our internalized, oh, and it finds its way. So we fall apart.
Hmm.
It could be the George Floyd stuff. You see the flurry of activism, organizing going on, and then in no time you start hearing stories about, oh, this group, they just fell apart. That group, oh, they had this some other thing, and a lot of times
Hmm.
the issues can be really petty. Sometimes it can be really serious, but a lot of times it's real petty stuff about the ideological purity of this person that other person says, "Oh, you're not good enough," or the ego of that other person, who a lot of times tend to be a male, that I got to be the leader because I'm the male, or they got some issues with folks who are queer, and other stuff like, whoa, we can't blame that on them. We need to confront ourselves in what we want to do, on what is still within us that we have not
Yeah.
figured out how to address, because that means we harm each other.
Yeah. I want to bounce a thought off of you, as you were sharing everything that you were sharing. I just want to hear your feedback or perspective on it. As you were talking about the repression and the mistakes and the conflicts and the splits that were taking place, in your experience and up to recently, I'm wondering, as we see that the Panthers lost, and you spoke as well about the struggle, the war that you were undertaking. My question is, do you feel that the war, or rather the particular strategies being utilized in that war, were premature, perhaps? Because that work had not been done to lay that kind of groundwork, to deconstruct those ideas, to deconstruct those conflicts, and to develop a larger base that was, I suppose, more prepared for that level of struggle with the state. I just want to know your thoughts
Mm,
on that.
yeah, I think of the words of Daruba Ben Wahad. Daruba says that at all phases, people should be preparing, in this sense, for the underground at all phases, because that's just the reality of accepting what the system is going to do, how they're going to come to us, knowing that we're trying to build a movement to overthrow them or to liberate ourselves from them. I think the prematurity with in terms of the BLA at the time was not so much that we shouldn't have been developing that capacity, but that the split in the party had us moving probably sooner than it was intended. And I'm saying this, I'm just rank and file. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I'm not on the thinking of those who actually were working on larger levels of this Black Liberation Army, because that had always been uh, within the thinking and the workings of the Black Panther Party. But when the split happened, and Ruba speaks to it, and others of us, I think we came to realize it, that we wouldn't have wanted to move as fast as that and as openly as that, and we suffered
Yeah.
because of it.
What's
Yeah.
something I've been inspired by the analogy that I've seen people use is the idea of moving like mycorrhizae, right? Mycorrhizae is this fungal network that connects trees and tree root networks underground. So it's the idea of you build up that underground infrastructure, you build up those networks and connections under the surface, and you may have a few above ground projects that are indicating the potential of the idea that are, existing to promote and to bring more people into the fold. But a lot of the early work and the initial work in preparing and engaging in that social revolution is taking place in the shadows, in the underground, in ways that allow us to, I suppose, catch ourselves in a sense, or develop or prefigure enough of a counter network, or a dual power, an alternative power that can eventually grow to the point where it is capable of weathering the repression of the state.
Andrew, you have written stuff that I have read. I'm like, yes. When you talk about the fungus, that thing, like, yes, yes. It's that kind of thinking that you're so on point with, that I feel like if we're going to get back to that capacity and be able to avoid certain areas of the past, that's the kind of thinking we have to get at. It's just that there, um, which is why even for me sometimes it feels like sometimes it's just me and a few comrades who still think on the level that you know yeah, we need to organize in the communities, do all this other stuff, and we still need to get back to organizing in armed capacity. And we speak that amongst each other. Um, but sometimes, because it's just us, we don't think other people are really thinking that. So it's even me to either listening to one of your, I think, I don't know if they're podcasts. I ain't got all that stuff down yet. Or I said, yes, of that. Like, yes, it's gotta happen when we begin to not be free as long as the empire with its boot on our neck. We have got to have multi-dimensional struggles. We have got to have struggles that come from different directions and all of this stuff, which is also why I am so firmly into that anarchist thing about, it can't be no one way. It can't be no one way. We have to move on so many different levels, and particularly with people with African descent, we have really got to understand what has happened to us on a psychological level to really get to the places of power that we need to get to. Thinking about what happens in the community that's above board and stuff. Those things happen. Then they should keep happening. When we should think about the best ways for that to happen. It's not advertised. It's not broadcast. It's just done through face to face, being very careful about like what situations we put ourselves in, but to really get it can be done because we do have to protect what we build. And that does happen in many different ways. One of the examples of that is the times I've been to Chiapas, that Zapatista experience. When you see the women, Zapatistas is an armed group. In the communities, there's times where the women, the Mexican soldiers will be trying to come into the community, and the women just mobilize and push them physically out of the community. The Zapatistas are still around. They still are there, but the women got this. They got this. And they know they're confronting the military with the weapons. That just showed me how many different ways, different levels that we have to build this struggle. Some armed, some not, but clear that if the death of this monster don't happen, we will never be free. We'll always be rationalizing, justifying all this other stuff, and yet another generation gets confined to this death-oriented system.
So true.
Yeah,
So true. And I thank you for sharing your
yeah,
perspective on that idea of, taking that diversity of tactics and being inspired by that variety of sources. And one of the things I really appreciate about you as well is just your intellectual humility. It's an inspiration to me, and it's weird to say that humility is inspiring, that I would consider it, an inspiration, but I strive to be, in my old age. I'm not saying that you're old, by the way. I think that you barely look a day over 50. But
I'm old. I'm old. God, thank
but
you.
I just like I'm so inspired by that idea of reaching that age and never like shutting down like your mind or closing your mind to just learning new things and taking in new perspectives and taking the experiences of others.
Yeah. You gotta understand. As far as I see it, we lost. That means for me, don't put us up on a pedestal. I know that, yeah, some of us are still alive and stuff, that people want to honor us. Even some of that, I ain't used to it yet, but I'm trying. But it's like we lost. There's no reason for me to feel like I can still be a part of this struggle on that intergenerational basis, but I can only be the leader. I can only tell y'all what to do. My thing is, no, we should not be your leaders. We should be sharing with you what we went through, what worked, what didn't work, but really promote that y'all got some different perspectives in here too. And you're going to have some different ideas in here too. Like Franz Fanon said, every generation got to figure this out. So I gotta be humble. Even the simple things with me being humble today is like, I don't understand how to use this fucking the uh the phone or the laptop's potential. And even the intersectionality. I get the intersectionality, and I think that's so brilliant. But a lot of it is like I'm constantly trying to stay up with some of the things that y'all take. It's much easier, y'all, or at least like when I hear you, I listen to you, and I listen to some of the other younger folks. Like the intersectionality comes through so clear. I'm like, yes, yes, we cannot be narrow at any point. Yes, yes. So I want to constantly learn, and I want those who I work with to understand, like, okay, I'm in my 70s now, and I've been through this, I've been through that, but you know, let's be on that equal level in a sense, because even you who might be 20 or you who 40, you can critique me, you know. Listen, on sexism, I tell you, my wife critiques me, you know. So shit, that's, and which I feel like for males dealing with sexism, it's a lifetime struggle. Just like if you was in Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, you say to yourself, you come to every meeting, you say, I'm a I'm an addict, because you know it's constant, it's tough, and it's got to go on, and you just hope that you have laid down enough so that when your time comes and the next generation picks up that torch, that you've made it somewhat easier for the next generation to overcome some of these things that are so ingrained. I battle myself sometimes with some of these things,
Oh no. Oh no, my connection dropped badly just now.
some of my comments. This day, because it is, we just need to do it.
So
I
sorry.
saw I
Do you
saw
think?
I was stuck for a second.
Yeah, that's my bad. Do you mind repeating what you last thing you said?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it probably more so around humility and being humble. I just, for me, I just always want people to know that I'm constantly learning, and it's always recognizing that I didn't say it before, but youth make the revolution. Into the intergenerational part is that we have a responsibility to share things with you, to share things with you, not to be your leaders, but to share things with you, because you are the one who are now charting this path forward. And you do have much more going on for you and understandings than we had. And I had mentioned the intersection, this thing about intersectionality and stuff like that. Um, the, Opening up to the fact that when we say community, it cannot be the old nationalist community, which was a very male-oriented community that excluded folks who was gay, queer, other things. I mean, we today we know that we even got to deal with ageism and all this stuff. So it's like these things now that you and others like y'all embrace, and it's like right there in front of your politics. It makes me feel like, yes, right on. This is how it's gotta go. I am here learning from you as and at the same time, y'all are allowing me to participate. There can be no greater way to live for me. Like if the mystery calls me tomorrow, I'm like, oh, okay, if it's my time, all right, because I feel like y'all got some things going that we did not have. And it's that knowing that yes, we will eventually win. We will not let this monster take us down for yet another generation. So I'm always like I appreciate so much the stuff that you do, and it's like you do them in such simple ways that when I listen to them, I'm like, oh, I can play that in the community because it's not up here. The community can get it because you're making stuff so simple. What is anarchism? You make it so I'm like,
I
oh yeah, I
appreciate
can
that.
show that. So that's that community. So this the communication thing, and I'm probably running off now, but in the Panther Party, we're reading all this Marxist Leninist stuff. But but how we were instructed, when you go into the community, you're speaking the language that people can understand. So that means you ain't going in there talking about the proletariat or the dialectical materialism, historical materialism, all like that. You talk with people in a way that they understand, and which is one of the greatest things I think about your stuff is that anybody could actually get on there and like, oh, huh, that gives me something to think about. Oh, I think I understand that. That part there is still a challenge. I feel with movement folks that we all the stuff we're learning, we gotta figure out how to communicate it. If not, we might just end up talking to ourselves, and the very people that we need the engagements with, do, you know. And if we did, we might find out that they may be more receptive, or maybe even just to be more curious in a way to want to find out more than we can imagine. We need it because this is not a 1960s struggle anymore. It's not. So,
Agreed.
yeah,
And
yeah.
although it's not the 60s anymore, um, would you say there's a piece of advice or that you either glean from that time or just glean from your study today that you would want to share with the next generation of anarchists?
Hmm. I'm always on this as an anarchist. Nothing beats face to face. Face to face is very important because in there now, and I ain't even saying like maybe that like the old anarchist concepts. A part of me is like there's the old anarchists, and then there's the anarchists that's still evolving, still growing, and all that other stuff. I'm not an old anarchist in that sense, no. Which is why, like, there's sometimes I had referred to myself as a postmodernist anarchist because it's like no, the ideas are going to continue to come, dealing with every situation and every period, and sometimes it's going to look a lot different from what the canon says. But I think what's important now it's complex. I was just in a study group with some young folks who are pretty much anarchists, but the study was around Sylvia Winter and Frank Wilderson. So Frank Wilderson, is like the Afro pessimism and stuff, and that's hard reads for me. But what I appreciated with them, because they're pretty much university students, that in the conversation on the Zoom, I can ask like somebody to break something down, because it's like me feeling like Sylvia Winter and Frank Wilderson got some important stuff that they're putting out there, but it's gotta at least come to me where I understand it. And they in the informal conversation, a lot of times they bring that, and Frank Wilderson's thing around like the anti-black world. Hey man, what is it about our people? This world on a world scale, in a sense, seems like it is so fucking anti-black. But the other side of that is that we still deal with so much in us as black people that shows the sign of how we are still uncomfortable with our own blackness. So if I'm organizing, what might I need to do differently to get under all the stuff that we have taken on in terms of our identity, from the fears to the more outward trappings and stuff? What is it? Because the pamphlet or the demonstration or the meeting or the political education is not doing it. What might we need to do different? So the thing with me is we need to be on that. What might we need to do different, even if we don't know? So again, does Zapatista say, like uh pretty much going forward, we ask questions, not the ideological, we already got the answers, but we will figure it out as we go, because this shit is deep, especially when it's specific. Our situation here is in the diaspora. I mean, we dealing with some issues that these other communities have not dealt with, because ours is really specific. The slave ship experience, the dumping on in this hemisphere, the generations, that means something. It means that it ain't no simple approaches to this, which is why I say, like, on that psychological level, the radical psychologies and stuff, especially those radical psychologies that actually are talking about decolonization, or that type of thinking, like how do we deal with the issues in us that make it like it comes out in such ways that we actually end up just harming each other or reinforcing our own negative shit. Like, oh, we got to do different. How do you get a parent today to not use corporal punishment on their child, to maybe explore some of the other methods that are being suggested? You know, what are we going to do with the street organizations out there that we want to become Panthers, lumpen revolutionaries, but they also got a lot of harm practices within their groups that they would have to be challenged on? This is not going to be a simple struggle.
It
Yeah,
will not be. But I appreciate
yeah.
your advice and your words of wisdom and sharing everything that you've shared with us today. I'm just taking a look at the time, and I'm seeing it's about 40 minutes left until time for you to leave, as you would have told me. So I do want to get to some of the questions that people may have. People have been listening very attentively. They've been loving everything you've been sharing. Um, and so now I want to open the floor to those who are curious or have certain questions, specific questions that Ashanti may not have covered so far. Oh, somebody's asking if you got any funds from the Retired Panthers collection fund.
It depends on who's. Listen, I tell you, there are a couple of groups that check in with us to see how we're doing, and sometimes that they make available a little financial um advance to us and whatnot, and I really appreciate it. And it's, like I said before, sometimes I feel a little funny about it, awkward about it in a sense.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, but it's me. I'm also accepting. Okay, yeah, I'm the elder, and it's like, we've been wanting folks to take care of each other, but now that it's happening, I'm like, oh, it's happening to me. Like, oh, really? And I'm so appreciative of it. But but yeah, there's a couple of organizations that do. Yeah, there's some comrades who like uh, Lorenzo and Jonina, who I would always say, man, they need probably a lot of comrades. They need more help because of age and health issues and stuff.
Right.
I'm not necessarily there, but yeah, I wish that efforts to help the elders, our elders, if there was a capacity to do it on a financial level and just maybe just more contact, because folks just really want to feel connected on another level. But there's real monetary issues too. But just keep us in there, keep us in there because we want to be in there.
Awesome. I'm seeing another question in the chat. Somebody was asking what your favorite hip hop album is.
Mm. Am I really a hip hop person or am I a Parliament Funkadelic person? Is the
Mm.
question.
Mm.
But if I was to talk about hip hop groups, I like the cool. To tell you the truth, I like the cool. But then so many years I've also been in New York before moving to Providence. Immortal Technique, who and this is the folks that you also get to know personally. And anytime you call on them, like they're there. There's another Spirit Child. At one point, Afro Punk. Um, there was Afro punk groups that I found myself close to. Actually, um, in Philly too, back way back, I emceed once or twice for Afro punk performances. All of that was like helping me to understand what was the meaning of these different sounds that had really revolutionary consciousness raising experience for folks that was into them. Because I never thought I would be going to know, even listening to punk, which I was too through Earth First and Animal Liberation groups. But it was showing me too that from music to the poetry to art in general, there was all these new different expressions that were helping people to move towards higher consciousness on revolutionary, or at least um, wanting to change the world tips. So, but I would definitely mention the cooler Immortal Technique. Um, oh man, there's a Puerto Rican group out of New York too. Um, ah, I ain't gonna remember. I ain't gonna remember. But I'm
But
still
thank
more
you
I'm
for
still
sharing.
more of a 60s, 70s guy.
60s, 70s. Okay, okay.
Parliament
Who do I listen
Funkadelic,
to from that time? Hmm. Marvin Gaye is a little bit later in the 60s and 70s, I think. I think he's more 80s,
definitely.
80s, 90s. I do like some jazz, I like my jazz influences, my John Coltrane's and such.
Yeah, yeah. And even with jazz, I've always been jazz. But even now, it's like a lot of jazz folks that I heard back then. It's like me listening to them now, and it's like I liked it back then, but I listen to it now from a much more deeper spiritual place, and to realize that even when they did it, they were coming from a more deeper spiritual place, like John Coltrane, Pharoah Sanders, Leon Thomas, and all these other cats was all coming from a liberation place, a spiritual place. And I say that now because a lot of the stuff I read now uh, is is helping me understand more from a spiritual too, because I think it's an area that we neglected when we were so scientific into the Marxist Leninist scientific thing. And then you realize that, there was folks that was into spiritualities that were just as revolutionary, different, and that we need it all. We need it all. And I find that a lot of the spiritual stuff now helps me also to feel a certain connection to all, whatever we want to call it, whether it's a religious term or a secular term, but it has some meaning to like know that it's not just you, the individual in this, but it's you connected to the whole galaxy, the whole everything, and it means something also in you developing the ability to withstand these particular monsters over the planet that is destroying our lives.
Yeah, I think the cultural
Sometimes when I,
component is often neglected.
yes, yes. So I talk. So a lot of times when I do get a chance to talk now, I am encouraging people, whether you're secular or you're into a particular spirituality, you got to get to that place where you know that it is more than just you, this physical you, that there's much more. And it's helpful in terms of you knowing that you got much more going on than you think. And it may be that place you go to when you're feeling most vulnerable, when you're feeling most attacked. That's why, like with a Muslim, like my comrades who are Muslims, they pray. And it's like in the moments that they pray, they are going to a place they need to be to know that it's okay and that they can go ahead the next day and continue their struggle. And we all need to figure out them places for us and not just to do the political activist thing, that there's much more to us than that. Yeah.
Agreed. I just out of curiosity, I see another question here. As an anarchist, the person is asking essentially, how do you approach other leftists? They're saying that they've been met with hostility even from Marxist Leninist folks. So I suppose they're asking, how do you engage with those sorts of people?
I I think more. It's so funny you ask because even right now, locally, we're having some issues around that. And I was just telling one person because we actually met at a restaurant to discuss some things. And if you're a part of for example, if you're part of a Marxist Leninist group, I'm not so much concerned that you're a part of a Marxist Leninist group. That's your journey. I'm more concerned with how you relate to people and how you relate to this struggle, you know, because it's like bottom line for me is if you got all the answers and in your relationship to people, you're actually putting down because you're really just looking at how you want to bank your ideology in their head, as Paulo Ferrer would say, then is that helpful? You know, but can you learn to treat each person with respect? Can you learn to accept that some of them other people have their own ideas about struggle
Mm-hmm.
also? And that maybe you need to find some kind of common page you can be on to work it, because ain't nobody, gonna just have one organization, or ideology that's gonna carry us to victory. Ain't happening. And I brought up something, and it's just recently, the last few times I spoke, I brought up something on them what I call petty differences. Ain't a Marxist Leninist group, ain't an anarchist group, ain't a nationalist group that can claim they even got a street corner under their control. They ain't on, none of them are on the verge of power, capturing state power. What are you beefing about? We got work to do. Can you not find some common page to be on, to be able to say, we got each other's backs, we got our differences? That, which might be the same like the liberation struggles that had to develop united fronts, the Mozambique People's Liberation Front or whatever that brings together. But you got to understand that none of us is going to carry this alone as an organization, as an ideology through the victory. That is crazy shit. I would not stand for it. But if the common thing can be how we treating each other, are you excluding people? You know, do you have all the ideas and you're shutting out others because like it doesn't fit your ideology? Then we have problems. And at this point, I actually would prefer to sit down with groups or individuals like, what's going on here for real? Because we got so many issues that are overwhelming us. You really got time to beef about Marxist, Leninist, Trotskyists, or even within the Marxists, or even within the anarchists, right? Let me just stay with the anarchists. The classical anarchists who got a problem with our nationalisms. Yo, I know my primary obligation is to my Black community. You got a problem with that, classical anarchists that just want to organize the workers? If we can't agree on something, then you just go do what you're gonna do. But I'm gonna be about what works for the liberation of Black people, because I know some things about the history of what happens when we try to unite with white folks, white workers, black workers, white workers, betrayals because of that materialism. So I'm always very clear with folks. Number one is the liberation of our people, and that's the diaspora too. You know, on the anarchist thing, I would love to see it in a way that we're sitting down, working shit out as we go. But don't come to me with an ideology that tells me, oh, it can only go this way. Because then I'm gonna tell you, well, you got to get out of my way because we going this way. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and we going this way means that we already amongst Black people, we're already talking amongst ourselves, working out our shit. That part, I feel like that part gets me. If anything gets me, is when someone comes with that ideology and organization that says it can only happen our way. So
And
I'll fight that.
right, as we are on this question, I want to combine two questions that I saw, and I'm getting a lot of questions, so I may miss some of them. Somebody had asked, how did you facilitate multilingual exchanges when networking globally? And another person had asked about how you connect the struggles of people. How do you like bridge the gaps between, different peoples to organize together a grassroots movement when there's so many trust issues, between these communities today?
Mm. On the multilingual, man, listen, if it's just like Chiapas, Sometimes I need a translator. My Spanish is not too good. If
Nor
it's
is
here,
mine.
if it's here, yeah, yes. Let me tell you one interesting thing. Well, one point around that. A lot of times, me and my one of my closest comrades, when we would go back and forth to Chiapas, his name is Carl. Carl speaks Spanish. Carl is Asian and South Asian, which just basically means Japanese and South and Indian is his parents. But Carl speaks Spanish. So when we in Chiapas, he know that my Spanish ain't that great, but I would get lazy and rely on him. There'd be times in the market where Carl say, "Okay, that's it. You got to do it." He put me in that situation, right? And now I'm like, "Oh shit, I got to do it." And the whole thing was around, don't worry about making mistakes because you'll work it out with them. They'll pretty much get what you're asking for, what you're trying to transact. So Carl would make me deal with situations like that, which I really appreciated. Some of the same things in our communities, like a lot of times our communities, even here in Providence, you got a Spanish speaking population, you got Arab speaking population, and others. So it's that's like, well, we got to make sure that there's if folks English, if the English is not going to be the common thing that we're going to talk through, then others got to be there to help that them dialogues happen. You know, so that becomes very important, and that's also something that didn't necessarily happen a lot back in the '60s and '70s. On the trust issue, I think the thing that I'm at now is that I want to help people to face the issues that have not allowed us to trust each other. So I had just did this proposal to a fellowship. I was trying to get some monies to do this project, and it's something I've been wanting to do for years. And a lot of it is around the table, the metaphoric table, and then the actual table. Groups, individuals that should be working together that don't work together. Can we sit down? Do we need a facilitator? Because with all of these issues and all these things we are facing locally and in the world, we don't have time to deal with the bullshit if it's bullshit. And if it's real issues, then still, can we sit down and put the issues on the table and figure out, put our best hearts and put our best foot forward and say, we're going to work this out and come out of this with some set principles or guidances that says we're going to figure out how to work together or get each other's backs in this struggle because we cannot afford to do otherwise unless we are agreeing that we're consigning ourselves to yet another generation of oppression under this empire. So so this even at this moment, I'm still trying. I want to figure that out, and I've been putting it down on paper because this proposal, I didn't get it, but it's a great fellowship. But it at least had me for the first time put my thoughts down on paper. I want people to sit down, discuss what needs to happen for trust to happen. And
Hmm.
there's already local issues that can be dealt with, And for one example, and then I'll stop it there because I know we probably got more questions. There's certain groups or a certain group that deals with pro-Palestine stuff that others have a problem with. And I'm like, okay, I know folks in both groups. I'm what I'm trying to get to do right now is to pull together a meeting with representatives from both. What can happen? What needs to happen for us to have respect, trust, and some commitment to getting each other back? If you see the police getting ready, you had a demo for pro-Palestine, and the police is vamping on one group, but you got issues with that group. You turn back, or do you go to them? So there's that and other things. But I'm like, let's look at it. Let's stop avoiding it. Stop the back talking. Let's face the issues.
Solid. The next question that I have, someone was asking what are some African, Afro Caribbean, and African American traditions that we can draw upon as an alternative to more hierarchical or authoritarian black movements?
A lot of times I bring up jazz. I like the jazz thing. I like the jazz thing. I come like coming up even as a kid. The it was soul music, gospels, and it was jazz. But years later, coming to like and becoming an anarchist, I'm like, well, there's got to be things within our traditions that lends towards anarchism. And one of the main things I found was jazz. You know, and the thing with jazz is that you bring in a group of musicians together, and um, and you're going to collaborate. But pretty much every instrument, every person playing gets a chance to play, to even solo,
Hmm.
you know, and you're together, you know. I'm trying to think of it's a trumpeter that talks also about jazz and democracy, and it's all pretty much around the same thing. Is that you recognizing our identities? One, I'm a trumpeter, I'm a saxophone, I'm a drummer, da 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 da, and also coming together to create this blended music that sometimes sounds way out, but you're doing this thing, but you allowing every person's identity, their contribution to be recognized, you know.
Absolutely.
And so for anarchism, I that's how I see one of the main one of the main ways that something from our traditions that can contribute to um, to the growth of anarchism in general, but specifically for us, that would be something like, "Yo, this is us. This is ours." You know, being in this empire taken from our continent, yet we have taken European instruments and everything, and we've done something totally different with it. That's us. That's hip hop. That's so many things. That's our
That's
art.
extempo, extempo, the Calypsonian tradition of extempo as well.
Right on. Right on.
So yeah, I completely agree. Just the idea of the riffing and also the idea of drawing on everybody's strengths. That you don't need to
Right.
have an authority on top just directing and commanding people in order to create something beautiful and create something impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Following
That
up,
in fact that was just real brief. I know that was real brief with Parliament Funkadelic. They're from Plainfield, New Jersey, my hometown. But before they became Parliament Funkadelic, like in my neighborhood, sometimes me and my age group, we could just be walking around the neighborhood and we would hear music coming from a certain house, right? And in this one particular house, it was like you would hear, and it was a lot of times jazz, but a lot of the sometimes you could go, you hear the music go up in there, and you can listen to them and stuff, but you come to find out later on that they're part of who developed Parliament Funkadelic, right? But for us, they was just jamming. They were jamming. And it made me think more like, yo, yeah, we need to get together. We need to jam, you know? And so that type of thing there, that kind of impacted me for a long time with just out of my hometown with how the Parliament Funkadelic even came about. You come together, you jam, and then you find some direction in there, stuff you want to go further with. So that's all.
thank you for sharing that experience and that response. I think a lot of folks in the chat have found that analogy particularly inspiring. But on the action front, I saw another person had asked how you motivate people to act.
Mm. Okay, so wow, there's really great questions, and I really appreciate. I feel like this has been. I feel like I haven't been this open in a while, so I really appreciate it.
I'm glad.
One, how we're defining act is how we're defining action. In the past, act action had a very malest orientation. That the toughest, most aggressive actions was in the top hierarchy, or was what was most important. And then you went down the list. Where today, I think we have to look at action. What are those things in terms of what moves me out of a box? So for me, in the struggle, and I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm trying to figure out a way to get people to visualize like a simple act of I've been a person who has not been outspoken. I've been pretty intimidated in the presence of others. This is hypothetical. Um, I want that moment to come where, regardless, I speak up. And at that moment that that person does it, it is a profound revolutionary action. I would like for people to imagine that as an individual who has been raised cis male, right? You've been doing this revolutionary group and stuff, but you feel something about your attractions to others. And that moment comes where you feel like, I'm not that cis male, you know? And when that moment happens and you act on it, it is a profound revolutionary action. And that comes from me interacting with young folks going back towards maybe 20 so years ago to see that a person, there was one person who I'm all very close to this day, realize that they don't want to be no fucking cis male. That's not how they feel. But that's a part of the revolutionary struggle. You so at some point that person said, I'm done with that. I'm done with that. I'm going to live differently. That's a freedom. That's a liberation that is profound. So it's the same thing with if it's you've been into a certain ideology and you're feeling like, there's something missing, and you if you can figure out what it is and take them steps that moves you out of that into better places, the places that allow you to be more open and exploring, you've made profound revolutionary change that contributes this whole process. Just maybe have never saw it like that because it's just been encapsulated in your own personal experience, but it's all for me when I look at it very profound. The day that I thought I was anti-sexist until my partner at the time, going back years ago, I'm reading all this stuff and I've read all this stuff, but in a conference, there was some kind of conference in New York. My partner at the time had got there earlier than me. I came, I heard something, I felt the urge to get up and say, I'm a feminist, right? And my partner, excuse me, my partner from way on the other side, because we didn't come in together, got up and said, "You're not no feminist. You can be an anti-sexist. You can be a pro-feminist, but you can't call yourself a feminist." And I'm like, "Oh shit!" So I felt like I shrunk, but at the same time, I felt like, "Oh, I never thought of it. Like I can't just take that term feminist that the feminists have developed and put it on me." It taught me something then, and my humility was like, I might have shrunk about 2 inches, but still my humility said, "Oh, I just learned something. I got to back up." So those moments, and when you back up and learn, and then you actually try to make steps to do better, you are doing revolutionary stuff. So for me, it's like expanding the definition of what people think act action is, so that they don't get caught up in thinking that the most revolutionary action is like, you just did a bank expropriation. You just broke a SATA out of the prison. You know, not necessarily. Don't put them kind of hierarchies on that, when a lot of times them hierarchies are very male defined. Those was things that I was learning from all these readings I'm doing, you know. So it made me look at a lot of things a lot different.
Yeah, you gotta understand the full spectrum of possibilities for action.
Hmm.
And I think also it's important to have on ramps in a sense to action. You know, a lot of times we
Mm-hmm.
inflate this sense of, as you're saying, the big, flashy, aggressive actions. But sometimes
Mm-hmm.
what it takes to motivate people to act is to show them some small way that they can contribute. And that can, warm them up to acting in other ways later on down the line.
Right. I agree.
I'm looking at the time now, and it is 6:52 p.m. my time, 5:52 p.m. your time, and I know you have to get going. So it
Okay,
was.
let's go. Listen, let's go right up. Let's go right up
You
to
want to go
six.
right up to it?
Listen, that's all
Okay.
right.
Let's grab one
This
more
is this is
question.
this is your fault. This is your
It's
fault.
my fault.
I'm putting it on you, yes,
How is it my fault? What did I do?
because this feels so good. I'm blaming it on you.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Blame it on me, huh?
Okay,
I,
this
I'm,
is
I'm,
good. I really appreciate this.
I'm blaming it on the boogie, but.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's see if I can find one quick question. I saw some. Okay, I'm seeing a question jumping out there. What is the value of political education in this climate?
Man, I'm not sure if that's related to all the stuff that's going on from Trump to Palestine. Um, if it's that, I really want people to think about what care and self care needs to look like and needs to be in this period. Because I think there's going to be a lot of people getting hurt on all kind of levels, from the psychological, emotional to the physical, um, to people feeling like really disoriented and depressed. We I think that we need to figure out how to make sure that um, we can show up for each other around care, and how we can keep each other motivated to keep us like, yo, if the Palestinians are fighting back against genocide, we can do this. We can do this. They got support all over the world from the people on the ground. And it's really interesting because even in them Arab countries around there, the people support the Palestinians. Them governments and them rich folks may not, or you can't trust them, but
Mm-hmm.
you can see that people in all them countries, they in the streets showing their support. Them ruling class folks and all them other ones, you can't trust that, you know. But, but they can, we can. They can, we can. And it's not to forget that the things that we do for each other in our localities, in that every day, that matters. That matters, you know, that contributes to that revolutionary spirit, that is really planetary. We should not think that it's just us, or it's just, I don't feel it. No, you should be able to feel it. We're fighting all over this world. There's people fighting. Ain't nobody giving up. We're not giving up.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions jumping out at this point in time. So I just want to express my gratitude to you, Ashanti, for coming on to the stream. I already have people asking when you're going to come on again,
Really.
when we're going to have another conversation. Um, and I just appreciate you taking the time to share your experience, share your thoughts. I'm really appreciative of the discussion that we could have and that you're still with us to give and to receive.
Right on. And thank you. And Andrew, I really do thank you and appreciate what you do. That really, it is so inspiring. It is so inspiring. And I encourage people, communicate, communicate in ways that we can all understand. If you're working in the community, communicate, because that's so important in moving this struggle forward. So I thank you for being on here. It made me feel like, yo, man, I don't want to, I know I got to go to this meeting, but I'm like, yo, you've allowed me to even open up and share stuff that I feel like I haven't, or not to the extent that I usually do. But I thank you for this opportunity to do that as well.
Awesome. Awesome. So you take care now. Appreciate you so much. And until next time.
Right on. And all power to the people, all power through the people, all power, all power
All power to all the people.
to all the people. Right on, right on.
All right, peace.
Peace.
Boom. Okay, so I'm not ending the stream just yet. Could have a couple moments to kind of reflect on that conversation. What do y'all think of that? I thought that was fantastic. I really appreciated the sharing of words. The chat I saw, like, as I was talking to Shanti, I was seeing the chat go in all kinds of different directions. But I hope most people were here and were present and were able to, like, take in the discussion and what was shared there, particularly his story in the earlier part of the stream. For those who were late to the stream, you could take it back and see what he was talking about. Um, and how often I do these live streams, that's a good question. Honestly, when I feel like it, it's not like a regular thing. It's just, well, I knew I wanted to do this one for this month. I've wanted to do this conversation for years at this point, but only recently got in contact with Ashanti to have this conversation. So that's why it's now happening. But I have another stream planned, potentially for the end of this month, if not the beginning of next month, which is going to be kind of a crossover stream between the video that I dropped this month, which was on the library economy, and the video that I'm dropping next month, which is on fashion. So it's going to be a bit of a reading, and so looking forward to that. Um, that sharing that would take place on that stream. And in general, I like to have, live streams of consciousness, accumulate the thoughts that I've had about different topics and different things I'm reading and dump them out and have some conversation with the chat, as much as conversation is possible with this kind of medium. I did want to address pretty quickly something that I was seeing some conversation about in the chat earlier, which was regarding the idea of left unity. And to address that topic, well, first of all, I've made a video about that many years ago at this point on leftist disunity. But the short answer to that question and to that idea of working with other milieus, other philosophies, and whatnot, I'm more project focused because in the same way that I can work with a liberal or a social democrat or a conservative even on a particular project, I can work with other groups as well. But the thing is, the type of project also matters. If it's a matter of developing, the powers, drives, and consciousness of people in an anarchist direction. If it's a charity project, you can pretty much work with anybody on a charity project. If it's a matter of distributing aid or, sharing breakfast or whatever the case may be, you can work with a lot of different groups on that. But when it comes to prefiguring and engaging the process of anarchist social revolution, there's limits to how much you can advance that cause and that project and that specific form of liberation with people who are fundamentally opposed to that liberation or fundamentally opposed to even the analysis of authority and of hierarchy that is so necessary to reach in that point of liberation. And so, I mean, a lot of people may be aware that I don't consider myself a leftist, as leftism is not a concept I have any attachment to. It's not a term, the left is not a term that I ascribe myself to. I just put forward my ideas. I'm interested in learning and exploring as much as possible. I'm very much influenced and motivated by anarchism. And really, I like to call myself an anarchist without adjectives these days because there's so much more to learn. I was just recently reading the Anarchist Encyclopedia and just seeing all the different perspectives that were brought together in that book all those years ago, and just seeing all the conversations and perspectives that are coming out in the here now and also in past decades. There's a lot more I have to learn, a lot more that I want to explore, and for me, it starts with the willingness to challenge the authority and the dogmas that reinforce the authorities and hierarchies of this world. And that is my starting point for pursuing liberation. So if somebody is not even willing to meet me at that point, it's going to be very difficult to work with them on certain levels. There are some levels where it's possible to work with them and for me to, sow that seed in a sense. But I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. There's going to be a point where if you want to do more than simply pursue a charitable cause or simply pursue some act of direct action or some protest, if you want to start prefiguring and building an alternative, there are going to be certain hiccups along the way if you try to work with people who are not challenging certain notions and certain perceptions of what liberation is going to require. If they have an incomplete or divergent understanding of what it will take, not to say that you are 100% right and they are 100% wrong, but it's sort of the idea of the different definitions of diversity, right? And there's, of course, ethnic diversity, there's cognitive diversity, and then there's also diversity of, gosh, I forget the term. There's another form of diversity. There's a text that I stumbled upon recently that I intend on reading in full and maybe potentially doing a video based off of to share it with you all. But the idea is, let me find the book real quick, the full title. Right, the name of the book is The Difference: How the Power of Diversity Creates Better Groups, Firms, Schools, and Societies by Scott E. Page. And there was a particular term that he had used to describe times where forms of diversity and times how certain forms of diversity are really, really helpful, whereas others may not be. And I think, in a sense, finding that balance is necessary. And this is I don't really like to talk about um, thoughts that have not quite fully formed or settled. So I don't want to speak too much more on this particular topic, but I'm looking forward to reading that book and to bring in what I've learned to the conversation at a later date. But I hope that y'all are getting the spirit of what I'm saying, at least. The title, I'll repeat, is The Difference: How the Power of Diversity Creates Better Groups, Firms, Schools, and Societies by Scott E. Page. I'm going to try and drop it in the chat now. The title. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all that I wanted to share for today. I'm pretty tapped out, energy wise. I have to eat and stuff as well. But I'm glad we could have this sort of meeting and this sort of exchange. The book, by the way, is not in any way an anarchist text or revolutionary text, but it is. As you all know, I don't really rely exclusively on political literature to inspire or inform my thoughts or ideas or beliefs. So you don't have to worry too much um, about that, about having this one singular myopic perspective, because I really do want to learn from as many sources as possible, to the extent that they can inform the aims that I hold most dear, which is, individual autonomy and social harmony. If I saw the Super Bowl, I did not watch Super Bowl because I don't watch Hand Egg. However, I did see the Super Bowl performance that Kendrick Lamar put on, and I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. Very entertaining stuff. And that really is what it is. It's entertainment. I know people are still having discourse about it, but that's why I stay off of the internet as much as possible. Okay, that's it for me. Y'all take care. All power to all the people. Peace. Oh, also, check out Ashanti's writing in the description. Also, I have my Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. If you wanna send some money my way, I'd really appreciate it. There's also the Patreon if you want to get involved that way. And there's a Discord server as well. I'll drop the link in the chat so that you can be part of the conversations that happen there. I'm not a part of the conversations that happen there, but you all can be. Again, because I try not to be online too much. So take care. Peace. Okay, I'm trying to drop the Discord link, and it's like the streamer mode is enabled, so it's like not working the way it's supposed to. Hold on a second. Okay, boom, there we go. Oh, also, y'all should read the Anarchist Encyclopedia, the abridged version. I picked it up in a bookstore when I went to go and give the talk in Portland, and it was. I've been enjoying it quite a lot, quite a lot. Anyway, peace again.